What's going on, gang, and welcome back to another episode of Scared of Normal. I'm Mike Murfitt, and today I'm joined by guest co-hosts Cheyanne Murfitt and Matt Cordova, and we're going to be talking about progress and the inevitable new devil that comes along with each new level. But before we get into it, today's episode is brought to you by our new seasonally inspired coffee, Fall Blend. This coffee has tasting notes of molasses, pear, and apple butter, which pair perfectly with the fall season's cooler temperatures. Hit the link in the episode description to pick up a bag today. So, you might be asking yourself, what does new level, new devil mean? Well, to us, it means every time I progress, there's going to be a new, bigger challenge. So, let's really get into this episode.
Yeah, I'm stoked for this one because I feel like this is something that's a lot newer to me. And so I'm excited to hear your guys' thoughts on it. But I think for a long time, my personal mindset was like, okay, if I reach this next goal or I reach this next level of success, then like everything's going to be smooth sailing.
Yeah.
And it's going to like just everything's going to calm itself out. And quickly learned that it's not that way.
No. Well, far from that. Yeah, far from it. I mean, it's actually the complete opposite, right? Like we talk about it a lot, like in our day-to-day lives. Is like the further along you get in a business or, you know, riding bikes or whatever it may be that you're focusing on in your life, like it seems like the challenges just get bigger, you know, like you look back, like for me, I know I look back on like, you know, when we first started Traction and I'm like, oh man, like the things that I thought were challenges then like are laughable because we have like mastered them. We've gotten so good at them, and the stuff that lay ahead and like the challenges we face today are so much larger. And I think, you know, kind of the way we're programmed is to think, because we are watching so many successful people, whether it be on TV or Instagram, is like they achieved a certain place or success in life, and you think that their life is just super cushiony, and like it might look that way, but it's a facade for sure. Like nobody is just smooth sailing doing nothing all the time. Everybody is stressed out about something, right?
Yeah, you never know what really goes on behind the scenes, on whether it being an entrepreneur, running a business, being an athlete, you know, whatever avenue you are on.
Yep.
You know, there's so many struggles that you've come with, different levels of achievements, or, you know, whatever you're chasing. It's like, how do you navigate through those and pick yourself up through those, you know, because there's hard times whenever you're in them. So you're in it and it's like, man, this is so hard.
Yep.
How can I get through this? And then you get through it and you're like, whoa, wow, that was so easy actually. And it just sets you up for another challenge. And it's cool to see whenever that happens.
For sure. And we talked about it a little bit earlier, right? It's like talking about how everybody goes through, you know, these challenges that come along with growth, and like some people just handle that a little bit better than others, right? Like some people like can navigate that, and like on the outside they're not reflecting stress, but like, you know, and I think it's also a learning curve too. Like we've talked about it on these episodes before, but some of the most profound advice I've ever been given is get comfortable with the fact that there will always be hurdles. There will always be challenges. There will always be something wrong. And I think that's kind of what the synopsis of this episode is, right? Is talking about like being comfortable with knowing, like with growth, like that will never go away.
Yeah.
So.
I think it's kind of like the whole idea of opting into the fact that this is kind of like a lifestyle you're choosing, which we've talked about in the previous episodes. Like when you choose to go after something that's off the beaten path, that's, you know, not normal, or we're like choosing our scared of normal lifestyle, right? You're opting in for a life that is going to be full of challenges and problems, and you're going to become a professional problem solver. And
I love that.
Yeah.
I actually love that. Like thinking about how you can troubleshoot problems. Like I think that is kind of the essence of like somebody who is a professional in their field, is like they are navigating and troubleshooting all the time. Like no matter what field it is, I think troubleshooting is like one of the biggest things that you should focus on being good at, right? Because you need to be able to say like, okay, like this is the problem. How do I solve it? How can I look at it from like a perspective, like off the wall type perspective? Because 9 times out of 10, if you're looking for like an off the shelf solution, it's not going to fix your problem.
Well, it's a skill, which we've talked about before. Like you're just sharpening that skill and you're getting better at it. And so when we do look at people who have like achieved a certain amount of success, it's not that they're not struggling with the same kinds of things that we're struggling with, but they're more skilled at it and they're more practiced at it than maybe we are. And I think it's a whole mindset shift too of like, I like think about my own experience, and like when a problem would arise for me, like early on in my business journey, like I would think, oh my God, the world is ending. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, I would freak out. It would be like this whole thing, right? Like stress and a bodily just like reaction to that stress and everything. And now when I think about those same kinds of problems that I came encounter with, like I can deal with them so much easier. Like, it's like, oh yeah, of course. Like, here's how I'm going to solve that problem. Like, here's the different things I've been thinking about this specific thing. And these are the different avenues I can take to solve that challenge that's coming up for me. So yeah.
I think that's the beauty of like taking a problem or like a challenge head on too, right? Is that like, as opposed to kind of letting it like you're sitting in the problem and being like, how am I going to fix this? Like, how is this going to get better? If you just confront it head on and like jump into the deep end and like learn how to swim through it, like, I think that there's a lot of beauty and good things that come of that, as opposed to like being that like in that procrastination mindset where you're like, okay, I'll get it done, but I'm going to confront that at the last moment I need to.
It's like being comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yes.
And being able to work through that and being in the space of, knowing that whatever obstacle you're in, it's not going to be forever.
Yep.
It's as long as you keep pushing forward, and everyone has a different poker face. So it's just all you got to do is put the blinders on and just keep pushing forward. And it's crazy at what you can overcome whenever you just don't let down, keep the throttle pinned, and just almost just let the journey take you. And just as long as you're showing up, putting that effort in, you can overcome so much without even kind of trying. It's just like it kind of just like the snowball effect almost goes, and it's
almost molding you more than you're molding it, and I think that's like kind of the beauty of the more that I've, the older I've gotten, I'm starting to see that a lot more. It's like kind of going back to that like ride the wave mindset. It's like you can't like force the wave to come in, but you can jump on the wave that comes and let it take you where it wants to go. Like, you can't shape that. So I think that's a huge thing too with these kind of, taking on problems head first, is to do that, and again, like really focusing on the fact that everybody's process to solve a problem is different. And again, like once you look over at somebody else and say, oh, how'd they solve that problem? Their solution may help you. I'm not saying don't seek outside help. However, like however you do it is probably going to be more beneficial to you long term. So, and
with that too, I feel like your end goal changes whenever you are in the process. You might have like, oh, I want to do whatever X, Y, and Z, but like X, Y, and Z can switch around sometimes, and it's like sometimes you get Z first, and you weren't expecting that one, but you get it, you roll with it. Ride the wave, and whenever the next set comes in, you paddle for it.
Setting that plan is always good, but being able to adapt throughout that process and saying like, okay, well, I thought I was going to end up, 20 miles down the road, but now I'm 100 miles down the road. How do I figure this out? Like being adaptive as opposed to like figuring out how to go backwards and solve that problem. Like just adapt to the surrounding that you found yourself in, and really enjoy the process and get comfortable with that so you can start enjoying that work of solving problems. And like really embracing the fact that with growth comes hurdles, right? Like that's, I think, the biggest thing with any taking on anything, just life in general. Like life is going to bring hurdles to you. You're never going to get to a certain steady point in life where you're just like, wow, I did it all. Everything's comfortable now. Like there's always going to be something, whether you're going to be an entrepreneur or a professional athlete or whatever it is. If you're just going to a 9-to-5 job, you're going to have hurdles. It might not even be at your job. It might be with your health. It might be with family. Who knows? But like, all these things I think are pretty relative, is just kind of taking it head on and just like, riding that wave at wherever it takes you and solving along the way. So.
Yeah. I want to jump back to that idea of enjoying the process, because that's something you said to me this weekend before I went for my pop-up. I did my very first pop-up for my business, The Common Ray. It was an in-person pop-up event at this super cute local boutique, Flower Wild, and I was so nervous. And I remember like that morning feeling like, oh my gosh, okay, yeah, I got to make it through it. I'm going to do it. It's going to be fine. It's going to be so much fun. But I was like, my mind was set on the end of the event. I was like, okay, when it's done, I'm going to be okay. Like, I will feel fine. And you said, enjoy the process. It's going to be like awesome or something like that. And I was like, oh, whoa. Like, I really do need to like stop and enjoy every second of what this day is going to be, what this process is going to look like. And I think that a lot of the times, like, that's something that is just so ingrained in us, in our society too. Like, we're always like living for the weekend, or we're like living for that next thing, or summer vacation, or, you know, like whatever that next thing is. We're just like, oh my gosh, if I can just get there, like everything will be so fine and everything will be so chill, right? Like, I'll be relaxed, I'll be whatever. And it's the same thing. Like, there's, you know, you get on that vacation, and then there's challenges that come with the vacation.
You get a flat tire, and you're like, dang it. Or when your flight gets canceled. It's like, there's always hurdles. And like, that's part of life.
I think when also you're looking forward to that, like, you know, for you, Cheyanne, you were looking forward to being done with the event because, like, you were so nervous about it. But, like, when you're looking forward to being done, you're missing out on all that beauty that's in between. And it's like, we do that with our days too. Like you said, like, we're looking forward to the weekend. It's like, well, Monday through Friday, there's a lot of valuable time in there, and there's like a lot of life that can be lived in there.
Most of your life is lived in the Monday through Friday.
And there's a lot of like simple beauty that is locked up in those days that if you're looking forward to Friday after work, like, you're missing out on like the little things. Like, I don't know, like I've been like this year, I'm like rolling my windows down and like smelling the flowers every morning in the summer on the way into work. And I'm like, whoa, like today I'm just really embracing the day, you know, as opposed to like before I'm like, listening to music as loud as I could, getting to work, working my face off, driving home, like eating dinner, going to bed, going and riding, whatever it is. But now I'm like, okay, I have to drive to work. How can I make this the most beautiful moment? I'll roll the windows down, I'll turn the music off, and I breathe in the good smells of summer. You know, it's like there's so much beauty in our days that could make our days better, but we're overlooking it to get to that, what we think is our end goal. And like you said, man, like, you get to that end goal, you get to that vacation, you get a flat tire, or your flight gets canceled, or whatever it is. And it's like, it's really hard, dude. It's hard to get out of that mindset. And like, it's funny. We were actually just riding bikes with one of our previous podcast guests that was on the show, J. Jones. And he was telling me this story. He was just overseas with his girlfriend. And he was like, everything that could kind of go wrong on this trip kind of did. And he's like, now in hindsight, looking back, there were so many beautiful moments, but I was just so stressed about like, oh, we have to get an extra hotel room because our flight got canceled, and like we're spending money and da-da-da-da-da. And he's like, now in hindsight, I'm looking back at like how much fun I could have been having if I wasn't worried about those small details. He's like, it's not that I wasn't having fun, but I was also stressed out about like what life was throwing at me. Like, as opposed to embracing the problems, it was like being resistant to them, right? And it's like, that's a hard thing to do. And like, it's cool, like, he's at that reflection point where he's like, oh yeah, he's aware of that, right? And like, I think that's something we can all do, is like look back on those moments and like, man, I wish I would have enjoyed that a little bit more. I wish I would have embraced that problem a little bit more, because, you know, again, you can plan for everything, but if you're not embracing the process and the things that come along with the struggle of everyday life or a business or whatever it is, you're going to be overlooking a lot of the beauty of what it is, because the beauty, in my opinion, is in the process.
The little things.
Yeah.
You got to take it like simple living, man. It's like what you said, you know, driving here, rolling the windows down and taking the smells in. It's like, if you can take 5 minutes a day, you know, to sit wherever you are, reflect and take a deep breath in and out for like, you know, just a little bit, 5 minutes. It's crazy what you can do. Like, you gain so much more appreciation for where you are, what you're doing. That's the process, you know. It's like being able to like have that reflection time and just be like, okay, this is it. And if I just whatever, keep rolling with it, you know, it's gonna something will work.
I think that's so applicable to everything that this podcast is about, right? Is like just really enjoying that process and like taking full advantage of every moment, whether good or bad, because there's something to be learned from every situation.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, and I think, in my opinion, again, like I think the bad moments teach you a lot more than the good ones. So like embrace problems that come your direction. And sometimes it's a problem that you can say like, okay, I'm going to make sure this never happens again, you know, and you can try and solve for that.
99% of the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's always that 0.9% or, you know, 0.1% that's like,
yeah,
there's a rock that cut your tire, you know, there's whatever.
We're not in control.
No control here.
And I think, you know, like kind of moving into the next step of this that we've kind of like written down, but like, you know, with every achievement or every accomplishment, you're stepping into like a new version of yourself or a new version of your business or new version of your career. And that's really going to like expose more like almost, I don't know if I want to call them weaknesses, but like vulnerabilities in your life, and like pose more problems to you, right? And like, again, like I've talked about this a number of times, but there's things in life that you know, and that's the smallest circle, and there's a circle that surrounds that. It's a one that things that you know you don't know, and the biggest one outside of that, it's 3 circles. The biggest one is the things that you don't know that you don't know, and that one's always chasing you down. You know, like there's so many things that are always chasing you. So as you're growing, like you think you know everything. We all do, and like the second you start thinking that, like more problems hit you. So if you're embracing those moments as you grow and saying like, okay, I'm like in a new realm of life. What is going to come at me? What can I embrace in this? How can I learn from these moments? I think that's important to do.
Yeah, I think the most like beautiful part about it is that as you are like seeking growth in whatever area of life it is, you're going to see internal growth. You're going to see yourself growing. And it's not like, for myself, I remember not anticipating that, like not anticipating my own like mind to change and like the way that I lived my life to change as I was, growing a business. And I think that that is like the coolest thing, because I think the farther you grow, the more like uncomfortable you make yourself, the closer you're getting to who you really truly are in your heart and what you want to share with the world. So,
yeah. Well, and I think, when you encounter problems, especially really difficult problems, that really does bring the true you out.
I was just going to say that, like, exactly what that brought up.
I feel like I'm a pretty calm person, but like when shit goes wrong and I'm in a bad mood, like I'm not a calm person, like people are always like, you're so calm and like collected. I'm like, dude, you should see when I can't fix my bike and I know it should get fixed this way. Again, it's like you're planning to fix something, you know how to do it, but then like you strip a bolt on accident or whatever, and like you throw a wrench across the room, like it really, like as you grow, like those things, like again, your vulnerabilities come to the surface because you're being tested on a different level. And as you grow, there's like more eyes on you. There's more pressure on you. There's so many more things. And really, whatever realm, whether it be that 9-to-5 career or, a professional athlete or entrepreneur, like as you grow, there's indefinitely always going to be more pressure, more eyes, like more people around you that are seeing what you're doing. And like that's going to make you have to be more true to yourself, or people are going to see that you're living behind a facade, and like usually that doesn't end super well. So yeah, I love that, like the fact that it pushes you to grow internally. Like I think that's like, again, that's beauty in the process, right? So
I think sometimes we can, like you were saying, like it's going to bring out those struggles that you're having internally. It's going to bring out those things that like maybe we as humans just like need to work on or get more comfortable with. I think that so often we are distracting ourselves. Like we're just distracting ourselves with the everyday, or we're distracting ourselves with like trying to make it to the weekend or whatever that is, that we're not facing our own challenges. And so when we do come into a challenge and we're really faced with it, it is bringing out those things that we can use to grow as a person.
Well, and I think, we talked about a little bit about procrastination, and I think that's like a huge thing. Like I'm guilty of it. I know, Cheyanne, you're guilty of it. Like
I'm a professional procrastinator.
I think everybody around this table right now is really good at procrastinating. And I know for myself, like it is pretty damning in certain situations, because I'll procrastinate on so many different things in life. I always joke around and say, like, I wait till everything is broken to fix anything. And like then, it's a really bad day, because like you're fixing stuff for a week. Whereas like if you're just maintaining along the way, and it's the same thing with problem solving, right? Like if a bunch of problems come to you all at once, you're going to be extremely stressed out. It's going to be really shitty. But like in most situations in life, that's not how it happens. We let them queue up because we don't want to take them on. Yeah. And
we'll do that next week. I'll put that off till the weekend.
And then next thing you know, your task list is 10 to 20 tasks deep, sometimes more. And then you're even more like in the hole and stressed out about it. And like that seems like a daunting mountain to climb. So like, as things come to you, focus on them, work through them. Like Don't just be like, oh, I'll focus on that later. Because again, like I said, I know in my own life, I have several different bikes, and I always joke around about it. I'm like, oh, I get a flat tire, I'll get on the next bike. That one gets a flat tire, I'll get on the next bike. And then next thing you know, I'm changing 30 tires in one day and like having a really bad day. So just
that's a really great example of what
being proactive instead of reactive almost.
Yeah.
Proactivity negates reactivity. And I think that is like such a good thing when it comes to this episode, like really saying like if you can be proactive, you can kind of beat that, new problem that's going to arise. Not saying that you're going to like conquer it every single time, but like you're going to be more equipped to handle that when it hits you, because you're not going to be saying like, oh, I procrastinated on all this other stuff, now I have this. So be proactive.
That was like, I used to like kind of identify with like, oh, I thrive under pressure. Like that's when I do my best work. And I'm like realizing now, like that's kind of for myself, like that internal growth struggle of like, okay, I don't actually have to be somebody who is like only procrastinating and only getting their shit done when like they're in the final hours or minutes of like having to get it done.
Totally.
I can be somebody who is a lot more proactive in her time and proactive in her resources and the way that she plans out her time and, all of that stuff. So
I used to feel the same way, like I'm like, oh, I was like I'm so creative under pressure. But now I'm starting to learn that like I'm infinitely more creative when I don't have pressure and when I'm disciplining myself. If I can put myself in a position of having nothing to do and I can have the discipline to sit down at my computer and be creative, I'm endlessly creative because my brain is not cluttered with nonsense. However, if I'm letting everything queue up, right, like
too many distractions.
Dude, totally. So then I'm sitting there with 30 tabs open and I'm jumping between screen to screen and I'm not focusing on the thing that I want to be creative at. And it's, I've said it before on these episodes too, but I really don't believe that there's anything in life or there's no such thing in life like balance, right? Like, there's balance when you're riding a skateboard or a bike, but like when it comes to your work, like you need to be able to focus 100% energy on something. And if you're sitting there trying to balance that, like the end product is not going to be as good as what you envisioned it to be because you are trying to juggle 50 different things.
You're not putting all of your effort into that one task.
Totally.
And getting all your creative efforts. And you're spreading all your creativity between however many projects,
You're diluting it.
If you're distracted, you're diluting your creative resource, right? So, or whatever it is, whatever you're trying to focus that energy into, like approach it with 100%. And I think, eliminating some of that distraction of being a procrastinator or whatever it is, procrastination is usually because problems are presented. Problems suck. Solve the problems.
Yeah. I think one of the like biggest realizations I've had lately is that I don't have to be the way that I've always been. And I think that that's something that's like, I don't know, that one hit me hard when I think I was listening to another podcast and they mentioned something of it. And I was like, whoa, like I actually don't have to be a procrastinator. I don't have to like be stressed out about this, or this. Like I get to choose what it is that like I pour my energy into, and where there's negative energy or positive energy, like that was a big shift for me. For sure.
Yeah, it's hard to be aware of that, right? Because like again, like life is so busy, so you kind of get stuck in your ways, and like I think it comes back down to discipline, right? Like stepping back and being like, okay, how can I like add more value to my life, and like using that little bit of extra time that you may have before you go to bed and really reflecting and saying like, how can I better my life? I'm looking at those places in life that you can say like, oh, I am really bad at procrastinating. How can I practice getting better at that? Is it tomorrow I wake up and like set a task list and like every time my phone goes off with a reminder, I'm going to complete that reminder, or my notebook, I'm going to check next to it, whatever that is, like figure out how you can attribute some value in those ways.
With that too, I think with the procrastination side of it, it's like whenever you're not having those to-do lists, or like you're able to check those to-do lists off, you're like, oh wow, I actually have way more time in my day. And I didn't sit around and be on my phone for like 8 hours. And then I was like, oh, I realized I need to work. You end up having more time, which means you're going to be able to enjoy some outside time or whatever you enjoy doing.
It's funny you say that because I used to be the kind of person who was always like, I don't need a to-do list. I don't need to write anything down. It's all in my head.
I'm smart.
And like,
not that long ago.
And like, yeah, it's not that long ago, but like
Yeah.
I've really started utilizing the reminders app on the iPhone. And like that's helped me so much. I have reminders, then I have a field notes notebook. Shout out to Draplin. Have that in my like I have like a little man bag from Topo Designs that I always rock, but I have that in there and like I'm always writing down stuff to remember because I find myself a lot throughout the days being like, should I need to do something, but I don't know what I needed to do.
Yeah.
So now that I have that log, I can be so much productive and be like, cool, I can literally see like when I'm hitting like, completed reminder or whatever. And now like when I go back and look at all my reminders that I've completed on my phone, there's like 15,000. And I'm like, wow, over the last year and a half that I've been using that, I've completed a lot of shit. That's really, it feels good. You know, we've talked about this before again, but like celebrate those wins. And I think that helps you overcome like that new devil that comes along with each level, right? Like when you can look back and celebrate solving problems.
Well, it's like what you're saying with like how you used to be, oh, I don't need a note. I can just remember it. Like that served you well in that season of whatever it was that you were growing towards. And then there became a new level of achievement or a new level of growth that you had to enter and you had to make a shift. You had to say, okay, like I actually do need to write things down. This is how I'm going to, attack it. And this is how I'm solving that problem for myself.
For me, it was mostly just like noise, right? Like it was how much, like I leveled up. There was more noise around me. There's more people. There's more people that need us to deliver coffee on a, timely manner or whatever it is, the amount of emails that I have to answer. So like being able to focus on those things and then step back and focus on, sometimes it's like I have to set a reminder to like pay our internet bill, but like I have to do that because I'll forget, right? Like,
you're so wrapped up in your other day-to-day things or your
other
business, other responsibilities, like those little things slip through.
Whoa. So like creating that like task list for me, I have a bunch of, tasks that are like reoccurring bi-weekly or monthly or whatever it is. So like when I complete it, I don't even have to think about adding it again. It's just there, and I love the way that you kind of like bring that full circle, Cheyanne, to say like, at one point I didn't have to do that, and like, but I also think like reflecting on those moments in my life, like I think about how many things slipped between the cracks or like how many good ideas that I had that I'm like gone, and like I've talked about this a lot. I don't know if I've ever talked about it on the podcast, but I talk about it a lot in like day-to-day conversations. Is like I'm always using the notes app on my phone now too. Like I'll wake up in the middle of the night or I won't be able to sleep and I'll like write down all the things that I'm thinking and it gets it all out, and then I can fall asleep and I can wake up in the morning and be like, dude, I had the greatest idea last night. What was it? Cool. I can look. Yeah. Oh, that idea is terrible. But I wrote it down. I can get it out of my system and I'm not questioning what that was.
Have you noticed a difference with typing your thoughts and writing your thoughts? Does one stick more with remembering like, oh, I need to do this if I type it, or does when you write it?
For me, I don't think it matters. I prefer it being in my phone just so I can like, especially with like the Apple ecosystem, I can look at it on my computer or on my phone. Yeah. And with notebooks, I find myself a lot like writing stuff down and then I'll like throw the notebook somewhere and I'll never look at it again. And then like 4 years later, I'll open a notebook and be like, damn, like I wrote down a lot of cool stuff and why didn't I reference that? And now that I'm saying this out loud, maybe it's because I remembered it because I wrote it down.
Yep.
I don't know. Perhaps it's better that way. I don't know.
I always remember things better when I write it.
Yeah, same.
If I type it in my phone, I'm going to forget it, but I can at least like hold on to the idea that like, okay, it's there in a space, but I won't remember it myself. If I write it down, I'll remember it myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair.
Because I'm the same as you. I have a bag with me all the time. I have my notepad and pen and like same thing. I have an idea. I'm scribbling it down. The amount of just dumb chicken scribbles in my notebook that's like.
Yeah, sometimes I'll look back and I can't even read my own. That's why I love typing it on my phone because I can always read it. Because sometimes I'll like look back and I'm like, what was I writing? What was I trying to say here? Because I'll like shorthand it and like just say like 3 words. You ever seen the Office episode where Kevin is talking very short?
Have we seen the Office episode?
You know what I mean?
Do you know who you're talking to?
Yeah. I mean, for the people listening, if you've seen that episode, you know. But if you haven't, like there's a character in The Office and he's basically like taking out every other word in sentences so he can speak faster. And that's how like I write in a journal. And then sometimes it really catches up to me when I'm like, you know, whatever. I don't have an example.
You're sitting in the back of a van, you're trying to write some great idea that you're going to change the world, and you're just like,
terrible
all the time.
But yeah, that's why personally I like the Notes app.
I was just wondering, because I've asked a few people who are note takers, and they do both, and I always am curious. I'm like, because I've heard if you write it down, you will always remember it.
Yeah.
So I just had to ask.
Before we get off this tangent, I just want to say one time I can't remember what member of the Coors family it was, but I was in downtown Denver, and he had somebody following behind him taking notes of everything he was talking about. And I was like, wow, that is really cool. Like that's a level of life right there. That's a new level. Yeah, that is
when you need somebody to take your notes for you.
He is at a very high level. He has somebody following him and he's dictating everything he needs done, and they're doing it.
That's amazing.
That was pretty mind blowing.
I have heard when you talk too much, you lose great ideas. So the more quiet you are, maybe.
Perhaps.
That's why I have so many great ideas.
Oh, it all makes sense now.
Makes sense.
So let's talk about challenges and how they are constant, because I think a lot of times we think, okay, I'm going to overcome this and life is going to be smooth from here. That's a big thing. I talk to a lot of people. When I get through that, I can't wait. Life's going to be good, right?
Or I get this car, or I get this house.
Yeah. We're always chasing something, and we kind of touched on this earlier, but like, you know, if we can get comfortable with the fact that something is always going to be messing with us, something is always going to be a hurdle in our path, a speed bump, how much more productive we're going to be, because we're not looking down the road and then blindsided by the second or by the time something hits us, right? Like, I think that's a great thing to be aware of.
Yeah. And it's like, that's life. Like, life is going to happen constantly for you. You wake up every day, there's going to be things that you don't anticipate happening in your life that are just going to pop up and happen. And that doesn't necessarily mean it has anything to do with your business or with your passion or whatever it is that you're like striving towards. But that life is just going to keep knocking you around. And it might be a busy season and, you know, an area outside of your work or your passion, but getting comfortable with the idea that that's always going to be there. Yep. Like, life is always going to happen around me. So how can I get comfortable with just knowing that and acknowledging it, and also continuing to find the time to do the things that I love and to pour into the business or pour into the passion that we have outside of just the distractions of what life is.
Yeah,
I think that's what's being present. You know, when you're present, you're like, okay, this is actually happening. I can, you know, and then that gives you the small goals to like overcome that small hurdle, and then that's like, okay, cool, I leveled up on that. You know, and you just, if you can, baby steps, like, you know, if you can just do the small victories or small fights and get the small victories, and then it almost like kind of makes you feel good, because you like, you overachieve something or like accomplish something, and you're like, oh cool, I did that, I can do this too then. And it almost like you start checking off things on your list, and you're like, whoa, out of nowhere you're like, I just leveled up and I had no idea.
I mean, that's where you kind of get to that reflection point, and you look back and you're like, holy shit, like the last year was crazy. I think I always see that in my life. Like, there's like certain months, May is always one of them for some reason in my life, that's just like abnormally busy. And like, I feel like I can never see straight. October is always one of those months too. And like, I can feel it right now building, and like how much stuff is like, you know, today is September 28th. And I can feel October, like the pressure of October coming on. And like, in past years, I've been so stressed about it. But like this year, I'm just like, dude, every time October passes, like the business grows crazy. I'm like, feel so good afterwards, you know, like in past years, I've been like to the point where I'm like, don't want to get out of bed. I'm so stressed. And this year I'm like, okay, I'm excited about it. You
Embrace
know, like,
it.
Embracing it and being present and like being there, and like also understanding that like nothing comes easy. You know, so growing doesn't come easy. And I think that's like You know, I always like use the analogy of like pedaling your bike uphill. Like getting to the top to see that beautiful view, it doesn't come easy. So you have to freaking pedal all the way up that hill. And by the time you get there, you're like, this is a beautiful view, but I want to get to the top of that next hill. Like you always want the better view. And I feel like that's a good chase to have. It's like, what's on the top of that next hill? Being curious is good.
I think it's good to have those goals where it's like you get to one hill, like, oh, I want to go to that next one. But I think also, too, you have to realize, like, I just got to this hill.
Yeah. Reflect.
This is cool.
Yep.
This is a great view.
Yep.
Let's have a cup of coffee. And then in a couple days, we're going to go to that next hill. But I want to soak up everything I can in this win, in this moment, because, you know, 5 years down the road, you're not going to remember that.
Yep.
So it's like those little moments are so huge because they're so character building.
Well, and enjoy that climb. You know, like I talk about this a lot too, but it's like my favorite moments on a mountain bike are usually pedaling up the hill because you're talking with your friends, you're laughing, you're looking around, you can see the scenery. Like you can see it from the top. That's cool, but it's usually pretty short lived because you're excited to go down. When you're going down, you're just focused on how much fun you're having. But you're not focusing on the process of getting there. And I think that's like another big thing too, is like when you get to the top, you got to survey and look around and make sure you're going the right direction to get to that next hilltop.
Yeah.
Because again, some of those are false summits, right? Like you get there and you're just like, holy shit, we still got a long way to go to get to the hill I want to get to the top of.
Yeah,
like,
that looked like the one I wanted, but that actually really isn't what I actually want.
the grass is always greener, right? Like you never know. Like you might get somewhere and it could be completely different. In most cases, it will be completely different than what you assumed it was going to be. And then you'll always be chasing that thing. And like in some situations, it's a good thing. Some situations, the bad thing. You know?
I think along with being present and is the gratitude piece, which I think is exactly what you were explaining, like just being grateful and showing gratitude for what it is that you are experiencing in this current moment, in this current minute, in this current like season of life, and knowing that everything that you're dealing with at this point came from a lot of hard work previously, and that everything that you're going to be dealing with in the future is going to also come from a lot of hard work. But being grateful for the opportunity to have those challenges too.
Totally. Well, I kind of want to go back, like at the beginning we talked about, like when you are looking at people who are very successful, whether it be on Instagram or YouTube or TV, or it could be a friend that you hang out with and they look super successful, but they are able to navigate challenges very smoothly because they've implemented, you know, processes that help them do that. Maybe that is having an assistant. I don't know. You know, like there's so many things to think about, like how are people at the highest level handling their days? It's pretty crazy when you think about like how many people they have there to make their lives go as smoothly as they look. You know what I mean?
They're problem solving with in other ways, right? Yeah. Like at this point in our lives, like having an assistant isn't something that like I can do, yeah. But maybe at one point I can, because my problems will be bigger and I can be able to do that.
Think about that. Like right now we are actively having to be the problem solvers, but at a certain point in life, like, you know, say like a celebrity, like a Hollywood celebrity, they have to pay money. So they had to work, you know, at one point they were having to solve those problems themselves. They've worked their faces off. They've done all the hard work. And now, you know, money is the thing that is fixing that problem a little bit, you know, so like they're still having to put in hard work to earn that money, to be able to pay somebody to solve a problem for them. Right. So they're actively solving problems by putting in hard work, you know, and like I think understanding that when you look at somebody who is of status, quote unquote, but like looking at them and understanding like that's how they're solving problems. They're still working really hard and they're just doing it through, you know, paying somebody to do it. And to achieve that or to have that money in their pocket, they have to show up and work their faces off every day. And they also had to go through solving those problems themselves and like being hungry and making it work. So
their solution just looks different.
Yeah.
And it's not that their work is any less.
Yeah.
It's
and they're probably still dealing with problems every day.
Yeah.
Because, you know, as you grow, your challenges or your problems or that new devil that's entered your room or your life, like it becomes more concentrated. Like every day that you grow and that you achieve a new status in life or whatever it is, like it becomes more concentrated. So you do need more people to help you, or you need like more resources to help you solve difficult problems. So, yeah. I think, also accepting that, there's always going to be that problem. Like, I think we've touched on that a couple times in this episode, but there's always going to be a problem to solve. So just like confronting that head on and saying like, hey, problem, how do I solve this?
Yeah.
Here I am, like.
Be friends with the problems.
Be friends with the problems. Make friends with the problems.
I think that goes back to enjoying the process, right? Like when you are facing the problems and realizing you're like, well, this is it. Here I am. When you are at ease and like can take that deep breath, enjoy the process, you're going to probably overcome that situation a little bit easier or more mindful, whatever that you want to call it. But it will make that process almost more enjoyable because you're not being like so worked up.
Yep.
And, you're like, you're spinning your head off trying to spin a wrench and it's stripping. You're like, well, if I would have taken a deep breath and got it,
surveyed the land, man.
Yeah, exactly. And just gave it a nice rip instead of, going nuts on it. You're not going to get out as angry or,
I mean, I see like there's so many problems in my life. I just ran into one of these problems the other day. I was just telling you guys about it. So we had to order new bags for our coffee beans. And I was, my day was so busy. I was running like crazy. And, I ordered them on my phone. I usually do it on the computer. And I ordered the wrong bags. Spent $2,000 ordering the wrong bags. And they showed up and I was so mad because I was like, that company sent us the wrong bags. Well, it turns out I was just not paying attention. So first problem is my day was too busy and I didn't sit down for 2 seconds to like, hey, this is a problem I need to solve. I'm going to put my attention on this. I was trying to do 10 things, and so stepping back and saying like, okay, how can I solve the problem that I've made the mistake for? Like you're talking about stripping the bolt, like had to step back, take a deep breath. Can we use these bags? Probably not. So what did I do? Got on the phone, which I hate getting on the phone and like talking to people about stuff like that. Called the guy. The guy was super friendly. He said, yeah, we usually charge 15% restocking fee, but you guys order so much from us and we've talked to you a couple times. We'll take care of you. Problem solved.
Went in with a level head, weren't mad, you just took care of business and it worked out.
But I stepped back. I kind of surveyed the landscape. I accepted the fact that I made the problem, and I think that's a hard thing to do sometimes too, is like you create your own problem and figuring out how you're going to solve it and not push it off on somebody else like it's their problem. Because like I was actually reading a review on that company's website and they're like, they were charging me shipping to send it back. And they were so mad. And it's like, well, you ordered the wrong product. And I had kind of done the same thing. And like the guy literally paid for shipping for me to send it back. And I was like, oh, well, it's because I approached that problem with a different headspace. And like, I just thought that was kind of like a cool, like problem solving moment. It's like, because like a younger me would have just like probably called them and been mad. And like, I mean, that's what I wanted to do from the jump. Cause I was like, I wouldn't have made that mistake. Well, it turns out I did. So I created my own problem. And I think that's something to be aware of too, is like, sometimes we create our own problems.
Well, yeah, we do.
Like think about how often you've done something that you've created your own problem. So I think that comes back down to like, maybe this episode wasn't necessarily about it, but ownership, like owning that you can create your own problems. So like new level, new devil, but sometimes you create that devil. Sometimes you are the devil, like I think that is something to be aware of. Like sometimes you are creating your own problems. And unless you're stepping back to survey the landscape and say like, oh, I created this problem. How can I go forward and not create these problems anymore? Like you said, Matt, take a second to like take a deep breath, look around, survey what's going on and say, okay, how do we move forward? Not only how do we move forward, but how do we not allow this to happen again?
That example made me think of just that this has happened to me so many times. And the fact that you said, like, sometimes we make our own problems. Sometimes we make our problems so much bigger, too, than they need to be. And I think about, like, the fact that you had to call the company and you had to, like, go through that process. That's something that, like, old you would have avoided and avoided and avoided, and you would have built it up bigger in your head and it would have been like this big thing. And I do that too with this very similar things, and I get stressed out over having to make a call to whatever, and it's like if you just can take that deep breath, if you can like sit in the process and say, okay, hang on, let me ground myself really quick. I'm grateful for the fact that I even have this problem. Like what a huge problem. Like I ordered bags for coffee, like because I sell coffee, because people purchase coffee from me. Like how amazing is that? So just like taking that step back and realizing too that sometimes we make our problems bigger than they need to be. And the second we just can like attack it with that level head, then it's usually like such a seamless like problem to solve. Or it takes 2 seconds where you're like building it up for days and days and days and avoiding it. And then you finally like pull the trigger on solving that problem.
I love that though.
It's so much simpler.
Be grateful for your problems.
Yeah.
Because usually if you have problems, that having problems is never fun. But if you have problems, it usually means you're growing.
Yeah.
You know, like sometimes, like again, sometimes we create our own problems and we need to be aware that we're creating those problems. But those external problems usually come from a place of like, hey, you're pushing the envelope and like something popped up. You know, obviously there's the random problems like we talked about earlier, the flat tires or whatever. But like, you know, for the most part, like problems are indicative of growth.
Yeah, if you're not crashing, you're not progressing.
Totally.
You know, so the crash and burn moments are always a bummer, but if you can just keep pushing and just realize like that's part of the process. I don't think anyone has ever like has had a smooth path.
Dude.
You know, it's like those bumps in the roads are milestones, and it's as hard as it is to realize the milestones may look as a speed bump. You have to look back on those and be like, oh, that speed bump was actually really cool because that pushed me in this direction instead of going into this direction. You know, they almost form you into who you need to be or where you need to be going.
Yep. Yeah, I like that. I mean, it is very true. It's like, you know, I think this episode kind of also touches on the fact that like, you know, we can have a plan. We can have a set in stone plan that we think we're going that direction. And like you do bobble, you have a problem or whatever. And like you look over and you're like, oh, wait, I could go that direction. And like, I don't think actively many people are aware of that when it's happening. But when you look back and you think like, oh, if that didn't happen, I wouldn't be standing here right now.
Yeah.
You know, like I think that's pretty crazy to think. Like, again, it's like embracing those problems and living in them and like obviously actively solving problems, but like also being able to solve the problem and reflect and say like, cool, did this put me in a good direction? Right? Like, because I can think of a number of things off the top of my head that like, you know, where I sit today, like how many things had to go wrong, so to speak, for me to sit here, which is kind of funny. Like, obviously, infinitely more things probably had to go right, but like a number of them had to go wrong.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a cool perspective. Thank you for that. I like that.
Yeah, of course.
That's really good. Well, I think that's probably a pretty good spot to end it off because that's I don't know if I've got anything better to say.
I don't think so either.
That was a juicy episode.
That was a juicy episode. Well, that was super fun.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you guys
Embracing
for
the moment.
Embrace the moment. Live in it. Solve
Ride
those
the
problems.
wave.
Yeah. Stop procrastinating. This is the public service announcement to stop procrastinating.
That thing you're thinking about right now, just go do it.
Go do it.
Go handle it.
Why are you still here? Why are you still listening to this episode?
Drop everything,
Turn
go
this
now.
off.
Turn it off. Go solve the problem. And while you're doing that, just keep in the back of your head. Just keep being scared of normal.